In terms of the Greeks, do you know what the oldest works of Aristotle and Plato, you know what language they're in?
It will probably be closer to Semitic languages, yeah.
Arabic.
This is a bit insulting, but it almost seems like you using that and the real dichotomy when you see the world.
Yes.
I mean, if we look at the Arab countries, not Arab countries, sorry, any Muslim country, it's actually dominated by Western science. You say about making Saudi...
I see.
No, I'm not even making that point, by the way.
The oldest works that Oxford and universities like that have translated, literally, verbatim, or from Arabic works.
And
what stops you from accepting Islam, Neil?
On there now.
Yes, that's the important. That's the fundamental.
You're under
question.
dawah. I know. You've got things that you say.
Neil.
Then all of a sudden,
what is
I'll
it?
shave it.
What?
No. Just hold on. Yeah. So let me just finish my point. You had the three sects. You can correct me on the terminology, but parts of Islam. One was scientific, one was purely spiritual, and the other one was a combination of the two. Two of them got taken away, and it turned after the Islamic Golden Age into a purely spiritual being. So your introduction there about the Greeks, I mean, it's disingenuous. It's yours, by the way. That's not something that I can critique. That, can't I?
No, but in what sense is it disingenuous?
I just described it. I just said that you got rid of the two parts of the big sects. One was the part of the Islamic Golden Age, one mixed spirituality and sciences, and one was purely spiritual. And you got rid of two, and you left one. I'm not going to repeat that again.
Yeah. No, but the point that I'm trying to make to you is that even if I, let's say, because that's a very polarizing black and white way of looking at the issue.
No, it isn't.
I'll tell you why it is.
I think it's beautiful.
I'll tell you why it is. Because you never had an entirety of the Muslims believing in any one thing. That's the first thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So you had certain movements.
Except for that schism. But
so you had certain movements that were stronger at one time and perhaps weaker at another time.
Absolutely.
In terms of the Greeks, do you know what the oldest works of Aristotle and Plato, you know what language they're in?
It will probably be closer to Semitic languages, yeah.
Arabic.
Ancient? No. It would be obvious the Semitic group.
They don't agree. They don't exist anymore. So the original Greek, the original words of Aristotle and Plato, those works don't exist anymore.
Okay.
So we have the oldest.
So languages change.
No. What that means is that as the baton of knowledge is exchanged throughout history, different groups will build upon the shoulders of others.
Absolutely.
Of giants of others.
Isaac Newton said the very same thing.
So he said,
I've only gone on the giants of others.
So
absolutely.
We don't say Islam or Muslims were the ones who came up with all the philosophy.
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm just. I'm not
saying that at all.
What we're saying is that
you're not answering my question.
But the question that the thing that I'm trying to address.
You're not answering 1 second.
So what you're saying is that
Islam has not picked up that tradition in very long time.
From the Greeks.
This is a bit insulting, but it almost seems like you using that and the real dichotomy when you see the world.
Yes.
I mean, if we look at the Arab countries, not Arab countries, sorry, any Muslim country, it's actually dominated by Western science. You say about making Saudi...
I see.
No, I'm not even making that point, by the way.
Okay.
But your point about the schism in Islam is false.
Okay.
You're not even making the point. You're not even answered the idea that you left that scientific tradition.
Okay, so that's your argument that actually...
You've not answered it, though.
No, okay, well...
Where is it being picked up? I see like some guys who...
No, but you made a point.
No, you spoke for a while before. I'll carry on. Right, so, and then I see a lot of rhetorics coming from... And I think fantastic. I think that's something that comes from secular society, from Muslims that grow up in secular society, and get very good at defending Islam and doing dawah and all of these things. But when you go to fundamental, like, Pakistan, obviously Saudi Arabia, where you have some form of Sharia there, you do not have the scientific...
I see what you mean.
You have. I said that there was a schism in Islam, and it was dropped.
So I'll tell you why...
You're still not answering my question. Why? Why do you take the history
excellent.
and then not apply it to the present?
Excellent. It's it is a good question, actually.
Thank you.
Okay.
You've not answered it.
So there's 2 points to that question. Number one is, did the influence of science and technology ever cease place and was somehow reinvented or reintroduced in the Western world?
No, of course not.
Or was it heavily influenced, in fact, by the golden age of Islam?
Absolutely
right,
was.
Okay. Now, the real question is that why did that end? Why has that diminished? Why has that somehow gone?
Yes.
And the answer actually is in Western expansion.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I can see that.
And if you look at, for example, the words of Curzon in the House of Parliament in the early 1900s, he says something very interesting. After the Ottoman Empire collapses, we should never let them arise again.
Yeah.
Their establishments of education, we should destroy them, so that these people never rise again.
Don't like Ataturk, do we?
Now, do we see that manifested in the actions of the Western empires and the colonial empires?
What I'm saying.
No, let me please.
Sorry, carry on.
Do we see evidence of that expansion into the Middle East and Asia, where their educational establishments are dismantled?
Yeah.
And destroyed, their scholarship is diminished and destroyed.
I don't know about that. No, communism did a lot of that in China. You said black and white before, and now you've just covered the whole world in either the West or the Arab world.
I'll give you actual examples.
That's a bit cheap. So I think you're billions of people, you're undermining.
If you look at, for example, India, right, where my parents come from, England ruled for over 300 years.
You still use the same rule of law. It's not all bad, is it?
No, just because something is in continuation doesn't make it good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
But it doesn't make it bad.
No. I'm not saying that it is necessarily all bad or it's all good, but your argument was that it can't be that bad if they're still doing it, right? My point to you is that just because something
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, well, let's go back to your original point in terms of why is it finished?
No, can I, because I understand your... No, let me try and understand your point. Your point is like a semi-imperialism...
I understand, but to have a fruitful discussion, let's not move on to too many points. My point to you is that, so in India, for example, some of the things that were orchestrated to ensure British control were that they divided the people. This schism of Hinduism and Sikhism and Islam didn't exist historically to the extent.
Oh, don't.
Look, please.
Come on.
To the extent that
there were separate kingdoms.
I'll give you. Yes, they were separate
and they were
kingdoms.
all warring, and the Sharia law wanted to take over all of it. I'm not saying Sharia is.
Look,
I've been to a country where they have Sharia. I don't.
Let me just explain to you what actually took place. Yes.
No. We're delving into history. We're getting away from the point.
No. But
because you're Indian, you're going to bring up Indian history.
No, but it's very relevant.
Me,
but it's very relevant.
No matter how long I stay in this sun, I can't develop a tan anyway.
It's very relevant. It's very relevant. It's very relevant. Because even if
you're boiling it down, we're not talking about the idea that when you go to the Middle East,
but you have to let me speak.
No,
right?
You have to let me speak. You're talking so much.
But if you
let me respond.
But if you ask me a question, and it requires an element of elaboration.
But you were talking about for about 5 minutes.
But your question could be a one line.
No.
But it may
you
require
talked about
5 minutes.
India,
It may require
Asia,
5 minutes.
Education.
Yeah, but you
went over multiple things.
You haven't even allowed me to finish the Indian point.
Carry on the world tour.
Okay. So they deliberately divided the Hindu and the Muslim and the Sikh by opening different schools.
Yeah.
They were no longer right, and the caste system and what have you. What that left is a legacy of disruption that we even see to today. If you look at the borders that were carved up in the Middle East, the Iraqi borders, the Iranian borders, the different borders that were implemented, we see disruption and problems existing till today. If we have democratic leaders that are not Western sympathizers.
What about China?
Like Imran Khan, for example. What do? We get rid of them. Right? We get rid of them. So if the people are good for their people, their educational development, their cultural development, their financial development, if it's at a cost to us in the West, we get rid of them.
Okay, can I just...
So all of these factors...
You're going on,
all of these factors have a huge impact on...
all of them, yeah.
On all of these things, right?
All right, so I'm going to... Now I have the responsibility to break down all of that, which is valid, by the way. Like, I'm not an imperialist, for sure. Right? I think 1%, only 50% of the country is not particularly valid. Right, but when we're talking about... So am I, I'm parched.
You want some water?
Please, if that's okay.
Another bottle for the
Do you want to move into the shade as well?
Okay.
No, I'm fat. That's the main reason why I'm sick. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. What's that?
Okay, so you went over the history of the education. Right, first and foremost, the idea that it's the West that has kept the Islamic Golden Age from ending because of Western expansion of schools. There's about 600 years difference between the end of the Islamic Age and then obviously Western imperialism. So this idea that the West is responsible for the education system, which has not made a revival of this Greek tradition, I think is an argument that in terms of timeline does not add up. You had complete Sharia law in many places, and you did not see a resurgence of the Greeks. By the way, I wanted to talk about Tolstoy. I wanted to talk about Tolstoy, not this.
When did the Golden Age end in Spain, in Andalus?
Oh yeah, okay, that's a really good point.
So the Crusaders come in. Yes.
It's when they met the West, though.
The Crusaders come in. They push the Muslims back into North Africa.
I don't want to do a world tour.
But it's important because that's
no,
the
I want to
context.
speak logically.
No. But
in terms of time,
look,
it's very disingenuous.
If you destroy hundreds of educational establishments in Andalus,
okay,
you burn the books that were piled up high, apparently. Yeah, and those books were burnt.
Conquistadors and
right,
all the rest
exactly.
everywhere to pagans.
And then, if you ask me in the same breath, where is the Islamic science, progression of science
that's
in the Islamic world?
But that's a frontier.
No.
What about Saudi Arabia? What about Pakistan?
So where does Saudi Arabia?
Where is it?
Where does that all come from?
Where is the Greeks? Where are the Greeks there? Where have they ever been? Not this idea of Islam against imperialism is.
What's your name, sorry, brother? What's your name?
Neil.
Abbas. Nice to meet you. Neil, you know what it is? We've got to
still not answering my point.
I think I've answered it very well, but Neil, the point I'm trying to make.
500-year gap.
Neil, the point. Look, you talk about 500-year gap. Mm-hmm. If you look at the works of, for example, there was a documentary done by Jim Khalili, about the science of Islam and how much it's influenced the Western scientific.
Absolutely.
Right?
If you disagree with that,
the oldest works that Oxford and universities like that have translated literally verbatim or from Arabic works.
So why did it stop?
No, but I've given the reason.
No, I'm sorry.
I've given you the reason.
I'm sorry. Okay, so if you burn books in Spain, but then the same books are present in many other countries that have been there, you should still have that tradition. The tradition is complete. Right, let's go back to the three sects of Islam. You kicked out the ones who liked Greeks.
No, but you've just raised the point there.
It was kicked out. You kicked out. No. You kicked out the Muslims. Sorry, the Muslims who were all about the Greek tradition. They were kicked out of Islam, and it was followed a purely spiritual path.
Neil.
And then there's a 500-year difference where you coallocate the idea of imperialism and this lost Islamic faith, and it's all imperialist fault. By the way, I'm an anti-imperialist.
One of the things of science and technology is you need wealth. You have to have an affluent society to be able to progress science, and you need stability.
So what happened for those 500 years?
I'm just talking.
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
You need stability. Now, if you have foreign powers that are creating instability, and yes, there was instability within the Muslim empires because they were also infighting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. Of course. Like anywhere.
What that does is that your priorities change. Now the priority is safety, is shelter, it's food. The priorities of investing lots of money into educational establishments to produce works of science is in some ways a luxury.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we study that, now let's get to the crux of the matter. Yeah. The crux of the matter is that, and please correct me if you think I'm misrepresenting you.
Go ahead.
That your argument really is based around more so that Islam somehow, or the Islamic understanding of science and technology was the reason why it stopped, rather than external factors.
No, I didn't say that.
So do you think it's external factors that stopped it?
No. I don't think it's as simple either this or that.
What is it?
No. So quite simply, also it fundamentally happened. It was a conscious decision without war or anything that you got rid of the sects which studied the Greeks.
No, but now what you're saying is that there's one homogenized group of Muslims all over the world who shared that view. The reality is that that's not true.
All right. What about? Let's just take. I'm going to move on. But let's take one more example. If you go to Saudi Arabia now, you go to the universities. They study ancient Arabic. They study Arabic. They do study the Arabic poetry. Huge, not necessarily replicated. And we can make the argument about literature, which is why I was supposed to be here about Tolstoy. But what he says about Islam. Anyway. He made a story about Mujahideen, you know? Yes. You know the story? It's a fantastic story. It's about in Chechnya. It's really good.
Right.
Anyway, the idea is there's this undermining, and I know this seems really rich because obviously it's completely dominant, but it seems as though a lot of Muslims now feel desperate when they get caught on science and technology, and they have to undermine it through talking about what you have on that board there
Not at
about,
all. No.
like Sir Isaac Newton saying on the shoulders, why can't we? Obviously, we can't do that, but it would be great if we would, as an atheist.
One of the things that I find rather
This will be the last one.
One of the things I find rather unusual, and not with you necessarily, but generally with this subject.
Yeah.
We never talk about the Greeks and the legacy they left behind in that critical way. What we actually do is
secondary school, there's critical education.
We admire.
You do Shakespeare, which is based upon Greek tragedies.
But no,
Shakespeare is based upon the Greek tragedy, and they have to study English literature.
But we admire.
It's false.
We admire.
And it's everywhere. It's not just the individual.
Neil, please let me finish. We admire.
Yes.
And we rightly respect the works that were left behind.
I think we should respect them all.
Right? That have influenced human societies till today, and will probably continue to do so.
I'm going to go.
Now,
let me just let me agree.
But Neil,
can we agree on one point? In the West, we should respect Islamic mathematicians more, but we shouldn't undermine the whole principle of knowledge.
What we should do, if we're fair, I tell you what we should do, is that rather than be overly critical of why it ended, we should celebrate the fact that 700 years, 800 years of whilst we in the West, and I call myself a Westerner simply because I was born here, had our donkeys and our pigs residing in the same houses that we lived in, the Dark Ages, okay, whilst the Muslims were, curing TB, tuberculosis, while Ibn Sina and the works, the Chronicle, I think, is it the Chronicle? The Al-Khwarizmi was used for 500 years in Europe as an authoritative book of science and technology and medicine.
The medicine books are still
right.
Okay.
So
which ones? No. Let me respond.
Please,
So
I'll just
which
finish.
one? Which one? No.
Just
carry on
finish,
talking, mate. Right. So which one took on the knowledge and used it to go further?
Yes.
And which one didn't?
The one that managed to conquer the other. The one that managed to conquer the other.
You're boiling it down as a 500-year schism that you're just missing out. Right. I'm going to go. Please shake my hand if you want.
Of course I will.
Right,
Neil.
No. I've been here for about 20 minutes.
Let's move on from that subject, though. Do you
Let's
yourself...
move on and leave.
Well,
Please, everybody here wants to talk.
What is it that stops
you? As a mathematics teacher, I understand.
What stops you from accepting Islam, Neil?
Gone there now.
Yes, that's the important. That's the fundamental.
You're under
question.
dawah. I know you've got things that you say.
Neil.
Then all of a sudden, I'll shave it. So, I'm going.
Neil, before you go,
nice talking to you. Leave it,
why are you running away like this?
I want to see the rest of this.
Let's have a 2 or 3 minute. Let's have a 2 or 3 minute discussion. Do you believe in God? As a mathematician, do you believe in God, Neil?
I want to talk about science and how Islam has
I want to talk about science as well. I want to talk about science as well.
Stop.
Do you believe in God, Neil?
Goes to dawah.
Come on.
Goes to dawah.
Why are you scared of the dawah, Neil? You're a big man. You're like big twice my size.
He's scared of the truth.
All right. So we had a nice discussion with Neil there. We've heard this argument mentioned many times before, which is that somehow the progression of Islam or Sharia law was the deciding factor where most Muslims or Islamic countries, Muslim countries today, have actually transitioned away from science. The reality is that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Yes, of course, throughout history you may find certain groups that were a bit anti-science or anti-philosophy, but as a whole, Islam doesn't have this schism, this problem with science and with philosophy as the Christians have. We don't have the pogroms where scientists are being, burnt to the stake because they're saying things that are different from what the revelation might be saying. Alhamdulillah, Islam doesn't have this legacy. It doesn't have this history. The two have clearly worked incredibly well together, and from the ayah of the Quran, or the verses in the Quran, where Allah tells people to reflect, to think, to ponder, this is exactly what the people did. And they pondered and they thought about these things and they investigated these things, and great works over 700 or 800 years of scientific works were created as a consequence. And I would say that much of that was influenced by people who were practicing Muslims, who believed in the Quran, Quran, and they saw the Quran as an encouragement to actually investigate and produce those great works. The reason perhaps that we find ourselves as Muslims in the situation that we are in today, a lot of that has to do with the turmoil, the problems within Muslim countries today. Most of it, if not all of it actually, is to do with the people who've moved away from Islam, moved away from the practices of Islam, where materialism or secularism or sex and these things have become more pronounced and problematic. And as a consequence, and we can't and we should not diminish the importance of what the colonial powers did to dismantle the very educational establishments, universities, colleges, the works, and how they were destroyed, and how that, yes, has left a legacy. And affluence and material gain is something that is very, very important in order to increase your laboratories and your places of science. Now, that does not mean to say that Muslims today are ignorant when it comes to science. Go into any university, go into any hospital, go into any research establishment, and you will find Muslims, practicing Muslims, who are in those establishments and are doing much of the groundwork for much of the scientific advancements that we see today. Let's not forget that the Pfizer vaccine, for example, in recent times, were invented by a Turkish couple, both Muslims. Now, whether they are practicing or not, I don't know, but they are both Muslims. So Islam and Muslims are still producing great works in society, but it is true that they don't own the establishments, the coveted establishments that perhaps the Western world has today. But that does not mean to say that somehow Islam is the reason why science and technology, perhaps to a greater extent, left Muslim countries. And I hope that we sort of made that clear. Obviously, we wanted to move on to a more meaty, a more sort of substantial subject, which is the very belief in God. But at that point, Brother Neil had some sort of wobbly knees, and he sort of left the conversation rather quickly. Maybe we can follow that up in the future, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, if you like that video, then click on that link. We had a really good discussion with Greg. I think you'll really enjoy it.